You know, I was having coffee with an old friend last month, someone I hadn't seen in about 2 years. We used to meet regularly, but life had taken us in different directions, different cities, different schedules. And as we sat there catching up, he said something that really struck me. He said, "You know what's strange? When we used to meet every week, I took our friendship for granted. I'd cancel on you sometimes because I thought, oh, we'll just meet next week. I'd be distracted during our conversations, checking my phone, because I assumed you'd always be there. But when you moved away and we stopped seeing each other regularly, I realized how much our conversations meant to me. I actually missed you, and now, sitting here after 2 years, I appreciate this conversation in a way I never did before." And I smiled because he had just articulated something profound: the power of absence. When something or someone is constantly, consistently, perpetually available, we stop valuing it. We take it for granted. We don't appreciate it because we assume it will always be there. But when there's absence, when there's distance, when there's space, suddenly we notice the value. Suddenly we appreciate. Suddenly we miss it. My friend didn't value our friendship more when we met every week. He valued it more after experiencing its absence. This conversation stayed with me as I left the cafe and walked back through the busy Mumbai streets. And I started thinking about this principle in broader terms. Not just friendships, but all relationships, all aspects of life. And I started noticing this pattern everywhere. The parent who is always available to their adult child, always solving their problems, always there instantly whenever called, and the child never learns independence, never appreciates the parent's sacrifice, takes the support completely for granted. But the parent who creates some space, who steps back, who isn't always immediately available, suddenly the child appreciates them more, values their wisdom more, misses their presence. Or the employee who is always in the office, always saying yes, always available at all hours, always taking on extra work, and they're taken for granted, passed over for promotions, never truly appreciated because their availability is assumed. But the employee who sets boundaries, who has a life outside work, who isn't always accessible, suddenly they're more valued, more respected, more appreciated because their time isn't assumed to be infinitely available. Or the friend who is always texting, always initiating plans, always available, always there, and their presence becomes like wallpaper, noticed only when it's not there. But the friend who has their own life, their own interests, who isn't always immediately responsive, suddenly their attention feels more valuable, their presence more appreciated, their friendship more treasured. I see this in my own spiritual community. The teachers who are constantly available, who respond immediately to every message, who are always accessible, they are appreciated, yes, but there's no mystique, no specialness, no sense that their time and wisdom are precious. But the teachers who maintain some distance, who are selective about their availability, who create space, their guidance is sought more eagerly, valued more deeply, implemented more seriously, because it's not taken for granted. And as I reflected on all these examples, I realized this is one of the most counterintuitive truths about human relationships and human psychology. We don't value what's always available. We value what we might lose. We don't appreciate constant presence. We appreciate presence that's earned, that's special, that's not guaranteed. We don't treasure what's always given freely. We treasure what requires effort to access. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about playing games. This is about understanding a fundamental truth of human nature. Absence creates value. Space creates appreciation. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create distance that allows people to miss you. Now I watched my friend that day as we parted ways. He hugged me longer than usual. He said, "Let's not wait another 2 years. Let's stay in touch." And I could see he meant it. Not because I had done anything different, not because I had become more interesting or more valuable, but simply because my absence had created a space where appreciation could grow, where missing me had taught him to value me, where distance had created desire for closeness. And I thought to myself, how many of us need to learn this lesson? How many of us are constantly, desperately, exhaustingly available to people who take us for granted? How many of us are giving so much, so often, so freely that our value is diminished rather than appreciated? How many of us need to step back, create space, let people miss us so they can finally appreciate us? Because here's what I've observed over years of counseling people, over years of watching relationships succeed and fail, over years of seeing which behaviors create respect and which create being taken for granted. The people who are most valued are not the people who are most available. They are the people who have boundaries, the people who have their own lives, the people whose time and energy are not unlimited resources that anyone can access at will, the people who understand that absence is not neglect, it's the space that allows appreciation to grow. Now, before we go deeper, I need to clarify what I mean by "let them miss you," because this could easily be misunderstood. I'm not talking about ghosting people. I'm not talking about playing manipulative games where you deliberately withhold your presence to make people desperate for your attention. I'm not talking about being cold or distant or punishing people with your absence. I'm not advocating for being unnecessarily unavailable or making people jump through hoops to access you. That would be immature and unhealthy. What I'm talking about is creating healthy space in your relationships. What I'm talking about is not being so constantly available that people forget you have a life, needs, and limits. What I'm talking about is understanding that your presence should be a gift, not a given. That your time should be valued, not assumed. That your energy should be appreciated, not expected. I'm talking about the difference between being reliably present and being constantly available, between being loving and being smothering, between being supportive and being enabling, between being connected and being enmeshed. Think about the sun for a moment. The sun rises and sets every day. It's reliable, it's consistent, but it's not constant. There's day and there's night, and we appreciate the sunshine precisely because night exists. If the sun never set, if it was always bright, always there, we would stop noticing it. We would take it completely for granted. We might even complain about it. But because there's this rhythm of presence and absence, of light and darkness, we appreciate both. The darkness makes us appreciate the light. The absence makes us value the presence. Or think about your favorite food. If you ate it at every single meal, every single day, you'd stop enjoying it. It would become routine, boring, maybe even unpleasant. But because you don't have it all the time, because there's absence between encounters with it, you continue to appreciate it, to look forward to it, to savor it when you have it. Constant availability diminishes value. Strategic absence maintains or even increases it. In our spiritual tradition, there's this beautiful story about Lord Krishna and the gopis in Vrindavan. When Krishna was present among them, playing his flute, dancing with them, they loved him deeply. But when he left Vrindavan to fulfill his dharma in Mathura, when he was absent, that's when their love reached its deepest, most profound expression. The poetry of that longing, that missing, that devotion intensified by absence, it's some of the most beautiful spiritual literature ever created. The absence didn't diminish the love, it deepened it. It transformed it. It made it more conscious, more valued, more treasured. This is a principle that applies not just to spiritual love, but to all forms of love and relationship. The teacher who is always spoon-feeding information creates dependent students who don't think for themselves. But the teacher who steps back, who creates space for students to struggle and discover, they create independent thinkers who value the education more deeply because they had to reach for it. The parent who solves every problem creates an adult child who can't function independently. But the parent who allows their child to face natural consequences, to miss their support, sometimes they create a resilient adult who appreciates guidance when it comes because it's not always immediately available. The friend who is always there, always listening, always solving problems, creates a dynamic where they become more counselor than companion, more parent than peer. But the friend who also has boundaries, who sometimes says, "I'm not available right now," who has their own life that sometimes takes precedence, they create a balanced friendship where both people's needs matter, where both people bring value, where there's actual reciprocity rather than one-way dependency. And in romantic relationships, this is perhaps where it's most important and most misunderstood. The person who is always available, always texting back immediately, always free when their partner calls, always accommodating their partner's schedule, always making their partner the center of their universe, they often create not deep love but eventual disinterest. Not because their partner is ungrateful, but because human psychology values what requires effort, what isn't guaranteed, what maintains some element of mystery and independence. But the person who has their own full life, their own interests, their own friends, their own commitments, who is loving and present when together but not constantly available, they often inspire deeper respect, deeper interest, deeper love. Not because they're playing games, but because they're demonstrating that they're a complete person, not an extension of their partner. They're showing that their presence is a choice, not a desperate need. They're creating space for their partner to actually miss them, which paradoxically creates more desire for closeness. I want to be very clear about something, though. This is not about being unavailable to people who genuinely need you in a crisis. This is not about neglecting your responsibilities or relationships. This is not about being selfish or self-centered. This is about recognizing that overavailability often comes from insecurity, from fear that if we're not constantly present, people will forget us, stop loving us, replace us. And this fear-based overavailability actually creates the very outcome we fear. It makes people take us for granted. So when I say, let them miss you, I'm really saying, have a full life that doesn't revolve entirely around any one person or relationship. Have interests that are yours alone. Have time that you protect for yourself. Have boundaries around your availability. Have the confidence to know that if people value you, they'll still be there even if you're not always immediately accessible. And if they don't value you, if they're only around because you're constantly available, then your absence will reveal that truth, which is information you need. Now let's talk about why this is such a difficult concept for so many people to implement. Why do so many people struggle with creating healthy space? Why are so many people overavailable to the point of being taken for granted? The first problem is that we confuse love with constant availability. We think that if we love someone, whether it's a partner, a child, a friend, a parent, we should always be there for them, always available, always responsive, always putting their needs first. And while there's beauty in being supportive, we've taken this to an extreme where we've equated love with self-sacrifice to the point of self-erasure. We think that having boundaries means we don't love enough. We think that prioritizing ourselves means we're selfish. We think that creating space means we're abandoning people. But this is a false equation. You can deeply love someone and still have boundaries. You can be committed to someone and still have your own life. You can care about someone and still not be available 24/7. In fact, the healthiest relationships are built not on constant availability, but on two whole, independent people choosing to share their lives while maintaining their individuality. Relationships where both people are allowed to be missed are relationships where appreciation stays alive. The second problem is fear of abandonment, fear of being replaced, fear of being forgotten. Many people are over-available because they believe, often unconsciously, that if they're not constantly present, the other person will move on. They believe they have to constantly prove their worth through availability. They believe that any space, any absence, any unavailability will result in being left behind. And this fear drives exhausting behavior, constantly checking in, always being ready to drop everything, never having plans that can't be cancelled, organizing their entire life around others' schedules. I counseled a young woman recently who was exhausting herself trying to be available to her boyfriend at all hours. She would sleep with her phone on loud in case he texted at night. She would cancel plans with friends if he wanted to see her. She would be available for hours, long phone conversations whenever he wanted, even when she had work to do. And when I asked her why, she said, "I'm afraid if I'm not always available, he'll find someone who is." And I gently pointed out that her fear was creating the very situation she was trying to avoid. He was taking her completely for granted because she had taught him that his time was more valuable than hers, his needs more important than hers, his availability more limited than hers. The third problem is that we're living in a culture of instant access. We have smartphones that keep us reachable 24/7. We have social media where people expect immediate responses. We have messaging apps where we can see when someone has read our message but hasn't responded, creating social pressure to respond immediately. We're living in an era where being unreachable for even a few hours feels strange, where taking time to respond is seen as rude, where having boundaries around availability is seen as being difficult or distant. But this cultural shift toward constant connectivity has not made relationships better. It's made them more anxious, more demanding, more draining. People feel entitled to immediate access to others' time and attention. People feel offended when they're not responded to instantly. People feel neglected when they're not prioritized immediately. We've normalized a level of availability that's actually unhealthy, that prevents the natural rhythms of connection and space that allow relationships to breathe. The fourth problem is that we get addicted to being needed. There's a certain dopamine hit that comes from being the person everyone relies on, the person everyone comes to, the person who's always available to solve problems. It makes us feel valuable, important, indispensable. So we keep doing it even when it exhausts us, even when we're being taken for granted, because we're addicted to that feeling of being needed. We've confused being needed with being valued, being depended on with being appreciated. But here's the truth: being constantly needed often means you're being used, not valued. Being constantly depended on often means you're enabling, not supporting. Being constantly available often means you're being taken for granted, not appreciated. Real value, Real appreciation comes when people recognize that your presence is not guaranteed, when they understand that your time and energy are limited resources that you're choosing to share with them. The fifth problem is that we don't know how to sit with the discomfort of creating space. When we step back, when we're not immediately available, when we create boundaries, there's discomfort, guilt that we're letting someone down, anxiety about what they're thinking, fear that they're angry with us, worry that we're damaging the relationship. And because this discomfort is so strong, we often cave, we rush back in, we over-explain. We apologize for having boundaries. We resume the exhausting pattern of constant availability because it feels easier than sitting with the discomfort of space. But this discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something different. It's the growing pains of healthier relationship patterns. It's your psyche adjusting to prioritizing yourself instead of always prioritizing others. And if you can sit with this discomfort, if you can tolerate it without rushing to fix it, it will pass. And on the other side is a relationship dynamic where you're respected, where you're valued, where you're appreciated precisely because you're not always immediately available. The sixth problem is that we've never seen healthy modeling of space in relationships. Many of us grew up in families where love meant enmeshment, where boundaries were seen as rejection, where independence was seen as not caring. We saw parents who sacrificed everything for their children and then resented them. We saw people pleasing dynamics where one person was always accommodating and the other always demanding. We never saw healthy examples of people who loved deeply while maintaining their independence, who were committed while having boundaries, who were present while also having their own lives. So now, as adults, we're trying to create healthy relationships without any template for what that looks like. We don't know how to be both connected and independent. We don't know how to be both loving and boundaried. We don't know how to be both available and also having our own lives. So we default to extremes. Either we're completely enmeshed and over-available, or we're completely distant and unavailable. We don't know how to find the balance. So these are the problems: confusing love with constant availability, fear of being replaced, culture of instant access, addiction to being needed, inability to tolerate discomfort, and lack of healthy modeling. And the cumulative effect: exhausted people who are being taken for granted, relationships without appreciation, people whose value is diminished by their own over-availability, and a sense of resentment that builds when we give constantly but aren't valued proportionally. But there's a better way, and that's what I want to share with you now: how to create healthy space, how to let people miss you without abandoning them, how to be valued instead of taken for granted. The first solution is developing a full, rich life that doesn't revolve entirely around any one person or relationship. This is foundational. You cannot let people miss you if you have no life apart from them. If your entire existence is organized around someone else's schedule, needs, and availability, you have nothing for them to miss because you're not a full person. You're an extension of them. So the question is, what would your life look like if that person wasn't in it? What hobbies would you pursue? What interests would you explore? What friendships would you deepen? What goals would you work toward? Now, here's the key: start building that life even while that person is in your life. Have interests that are yours alone. Have friends who are independent of that relationship. Have commitments that sometimes take priority. Have a sense of self that exists apart from any single relationship. When you have a full life, your presence becomes a gift you're choosing to give rather than a default state you're stuck in. The second solution is implementing strategic unavailability. This doesn't mean being randomly unresponsive or deliberately difficult to reach. It means having clear times when you're not available and communicating that clearly. Maybe you don't respond to texts after 9 p.m. because that's your wind down time. Maybe you have certain evenings that are for your personal interests or other friendships. Maybe you don't always answer calls immediately because you're in the middle of something. Maybe you occasionally say, "I'm not available that day," without over-explaining. This creates several things. First, it teaches people to value the times you are available. Second, it demonstrates that you have a life and priorities beyond them. Third, it prevents the resentment that builds when you're always accommodating others at your own expense. Fourth, it creates the space for them to actually miss you, to look forward to time with you, to appreciate when you are present. The third solution is learning to delay gratification in relationships. We're so conditioned to respond immediately, to be available instantly, that we've forgotten that making people wait reasonably can actually increase value. If someone texts you, you don't have to respond within seconds. You can take an hour, several hours, or even until the next day if it's not urgent. If someone asks to meet up, you don't have to immediately say yes and accommodate their schedule. You can check your schedule and propose a time that works for you. This isn't about playing games. It's about demonstrating through your behavior that your time has value, that you have priorities, that you're not sitting around waiting for their contact. And when you do this consistently, something interesting happens. People start respecting your time more, valuing your presence more, appreciating when you are available more. The fourth solution is the power of the graceful decline. Learn to say no without guilt, without over-explaining, without apologizing excessively. "I'm not available that day. That doesn't work for my schedule. I have other commitments. I need that time for myself." These are complete sentences. You don't need to justify, defend, or explain. The more comfortable you become with declining, with being unavailable sometimes, the more people will respect your boundaries and value the times you are available. I see people exhaust themselves because they've never learned to say a simple no. They say yes to every invitation, every request, every demand on their time, and then they wonder why they're overwhelmed and taken for granted. When you say yes to everything, your yes becomes meaningless, but when you say no sometimes, your yes becomes valuable. The fifth solution is creating mystery and independence. This is particularly important in romantic relationships, but applies to all relationships. Don't share every thought, every activity, every moment of your day. Have experiences that are yours alone. Have thoughts you keep to yourself. Have a part of your life that remains private. This isn't about being secretive or dishonest. It's about maintaining your individuality, your independence, your sense of self that exists apart from the relationship. When someone knows everything about you, when they have access to all your time, when there's no mystery, relationships can become stale. But when you maintain some independence, some mystery, some parts of yourself that they have to be curious about, relationships stay dynamic and interesting. They have to actively engage with you to know what's happening in your life rather than assuming they already know everything. The sixth solution is periodically disappearing into your own life. This might sound dramatic, but what I mean is taking time away not from the relationship, but for yourself. Maybe it's a weekend retreat. Maybe it's an evening each week that's just for you. Maybe it's a hobby that fully absorbs you. Maybe it's a project that requires your focused attention. During these times, you're not constantly checking in, not constantly available, not making that relationship the center. You're absorbed in your own life. What this does is two things. First, it gives you the space to reconnect with yourself, to recharge, to remember who you are apart from that relationship. Second, it gives the other person space to miss you, to reflect on what you bring to their life, to appreciate your presence by experiencing your absence. The seventh solution is matching energy and availability. If someone is not making you a priority, if they're casually available to you, if they take days to respond, if they're often busy, don't make them your priority. Don't respond immediately. Don't always be available. Match their energy. This isn't about being petty or keeping score. This is about not giving more than you receive, about maintaining balance, about not making someone the center of your life when you're on the periphery of theirs. I've seen too many people exhaust themselves being constantly available to people who are barely available to them. This creates an unbalanced dynamic where one person is taken for granted and the other is unconsciously taking advantage. When you match energy, you create balance. You teach people how to treat you through how you treat yourself. Now let me give you specific, practical commitments that will help you implement these solutions. First commitment, the daily unavailability block. Every single day, have a block of time, minimum 2 hours, where you're completely unavailable. Phone on silent or in another room. No checking messages. This time is for you for reading, exercising, creating, reflecting, whatever feeds your soul. This is non-negotiable regardless of who needs you. This daily practice trains both you and others that you're not always available. Second commitment, the full life list. Write down 10 interests, hobbies, or goals that have nothing to do with any specific relationship, things that are yours alone. Then commit to spending time on at least 3 of these every week. Build a life that's rich and full, independent of any single person. The fuller your life, the more you naturally create space for people to miss you. Third commitment, the delayed response practice. For the next 30 days, practice not responding immediately to non-urgent messages. Wait at least 1 hour, sometimes several hours, or until the next day. Notice how this doesn't damage your relationships. Notice how people adjust. Notice how your time becomes more respected. Fourth commitment, the weekly solo time. Once a week, do something alone that you enjoy. Could be anything: a walk, a movie, a cafe visit, a museum. Don't share what you're doing in real time on social media. Don't text people during it. Just be present with yourself. This builds your capacity to be alone and creates space in your relationships. Fifth commitment, the boundary rehearsal. Write down 3 boundaries you need to set around your availability. Then practice saying them out loud until they feel comfortable. I'm not available after 9 p.m. I need Sundays for myself. I can't always respond immediately. Rehearse until these feel natural rather than guilty. Sixth commitment, the graceful decline practice. Once a week, say no to something you would typically say yes to out of over-accommodation. Start with lower stakes situations. No, I can't make that event. That time doesn't work for me. Don't over-explain. Notice that relationships survive your boundaries. Seventh commitment, the matching energy audit. For each significant relationship, honestly assess: am I giving more energy and availability than I'm receiving? If yes, consciously pull back to create balance. Match their response time, match their availability, match their effort, create equilibrium. Eighth commitment, the mystery practice. Each week, have one experience you don't immediately share. Don't post about it. Don't text about it. Maybe share it later if it comes up naturally, or maybe keep it to yourself. Practice having a life that's not constantly on display, not constantly available for others' consumption. Ninth commitment, the presence quality over quantity. When you are with people, be fully present, put your phone away, give full attention, be genuinely engaged. This makes the time you do give more valuable because it's quality time, not just time. People will value these moments more and miss them more when you're not around. 10th commitment, the monthly evaluation. Once a month, assess your relationships. Are you being taken for granted anywhere? Are you over-available anywhere? Are you maintaining your full life? Are people appreciating your presence or assuming it? Based on this assessment, adjust your availability and boundaries accordingly. Now, I want to address something important. Some of you might be thinking, but won't creating space damage my relationships? Won't people feel rejected or abandoned? Won't they move on to someone more available? And these are legitimate concerns. Here's the truth. If creating healthy space damages a relationship, it wasn't a healthy relationship. If having boundaries makes someone leave, they were only there because you had no boundaries. If being unavailable sometimes makes someone lose interest, they weren't interested in you, they were interested in your constant availability. So in a sense, creating space is a test. It reveals the truth about relationships. Healthy relationships survive and even thrive with space. Healthy people respect boundaries. Healthy dynamics involve both people having full lives and choosing to intertwine them, not sacrificing one life to service another. So if creating space causes problems, that's information. That's revealing that the relationship needed to change anyway. Also understand that there will be an adjustment period. If you've been constantly available and suddenly start having boundaries, people might be confused or even frustrated at first. This is normal. Hold steady. Don't rush to explain or apologize. Let people adjust to the new dynamic. Most will adjust fine and will actually respect you more. Some won't adjust, and that's information about whether they truly value you or just value your availability. Let me share one final story. There was a mother who came to me exhausted and resentful. She had 3 adult children who constantly called her, asked her to babysit, asked for money, asked her to solve their problems. She was always available, always helping, always accommodating, and she felt completely taken for granted. So I asked her, when was the last time they thanked you? She couldn't remember. When was the last time they asked about your life? She teared up. Never. When was the last time you said no to a request? She looked shocked. I've never said no. They're my children. I gently suggested she try something different. Say no sometimes, not to be punishing, but to have a life. She was terrified but agreed. She started saying no. She started having plans that couldn't be rearranged. She started taking time for herself, and at first her children were shocked, even upset. They had to find alternative childcare, solve their own problems, manage their own finances. But something beautiful happened over the following months. They started calling to actually talk to her, not just to ask for things. They started asking about her life. They started inviting her places rather than just requesting her services. They started appreciating her help when she did give it. One of them actually said, "Mom, I never realized how much you did for us until you started doing less. I'm sorry I took you for granted." The space she created allowed appreciation to grow. They had to miss her to value her. This is what I want for you. I want people to value you, not take you for granted. I want your presence to be appreciated, not assumed. I want your time to be respected, not expected. I want your relationships to be balanced, not one-sided. And the path to this is counterintuitive. It's not doing more, it's doing less. It's not being more available, it's being more boundaried. It's not constantly giving, it's strategically stepping back. It's letting them miss you. So starting today, give yourself permission. Permission to have a full life beyond any single relationship. Permission to be unavailable sometimes. Permission to say no. Permission to have boundaries. Permission to prioritize yourself. Permission to create the space that allows people to miss you. And watch what happens. Watch how the people who truly value you will appreciate you more. Watch how relationships become more balanced. Watch how resentment fades when you're no longer overgiving. Watch how your energy returns when you're no longer exhausting yourself being constantly available. Watch how your self-respect grows when you honor your own needs and time. Let them miss you, not to punish them, but to give them the gift of appreciating your presence through experiencing your absence. Not to abandon them, but to teach them that your availability is a choice, not a given. Not to play games, but to create healthy dynamics where both people's time and energy are valued. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for being open to this message, and thank you for your courage to prioritize yourself. May you create healthy space in your relationships. May you be valued rather than taken for granted. And may you discover the freedom and peace that comes from having a full life that doesn't revolve entirely around others' needs. Let them miss you, and in doing so, teach them to appreciate you. Thank you.